Welcome to the Moses Kotane Institute's virtual lecture. Our topic for today is on smart government, and today we have our guest lecturer, Mr. Sandile Mahlaba, who is the executive on public sector at Microsoft South Africa. I hope that you enjoy the lecture today. My name is Thandeka Ellenson from the Moses Kotane Institute, and I'm your host today. Mr. Mahlaba? Mr. Mahlaba, your mic is off.
Oh, hi, Thandeka. Thank you very much for for today. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you very much for everybody who has joined us today. I'm going to start my slides just to maybe start with the conversation. I hope my slides are showing, and Thandeka will confirm as they're
Yes,
building
they
up.
are.
As it's building up. So my name is Sandile Mahlaba. I look after the public sector for KZN, and my work is very simple: working with government and helping our government colleagues to be able to understand and to work with what we term these days digital transformation, which in the around the world we're speaking now these days around the smart government. And firstly, I hope everybody's safe and everybody's well in this epidemic that we are dealing with and in the whole world. So I will try just to maybe go through. I've got a very good slides and there's not a lot of them. That guide us where we're going to be going. So just maybe let's just set a scene here. Currently, the world is faced up with a new reality. And I think everybody is experiencing the new, we call it new normal, the new way of doing things, working from home, studying with different ways of getting our kids running, and being able to attend school and catching up on school. Let's maybe come back and just talk about what has been happening. So we know, for example, that some of the trends have started a couple of years ago. I mean, mobility is becoming a normal thing that we have experienced now with COVID-19. Majority of us were working from home and we were able to do some or majority of the work that we're expecting to do. That is how mobile things are these days. And the other reality we're faced with in the world is Internet of Things. I mean, things are connected. Sensors are becoming a reality of things. I mean, I don't know when was the last time I saw a washing machine or a car that does not have a sensor of some sort, either for insurance purposes or for guiding when you were going to go for service. And then the other part that is, again, very nice to talk about, there was something that came in that has been a very interesting learning for government and a change in government. It's called the cloud technology. That's another new learning that we actually faced with this particular hosted somewhere else and being having access to majority of our things wherever we do. There's big data, which has been a very interesting conversation during COVID, and we see it every day these days. I mean, the amount of stats we are getting around infections, around the people who have actually been able to recover, and the amount of actual information we get about people who have unfortunately passed on is just show the power of big data and what is happening around the whole part. Social is another very interesting trend that we actually have seen growing very highly in this particular time. I mean, the president have addressed us so many times. Majority of this time, he has addressed us utilizing social media. He has actually used social media more to actually spread information around it. Our own province, KwaZulu-Natal, I mean, majority of the time these days, while you are watching on TV and radio, but it's getting personalized these days. I can see it on my phone, on the social media, when the premier is addressing us, majority of Sundays, when he give us the status and where the province is. And again, our own MECs, when they are visiting places, they're now able even to connect with us, not only through TV, but in social media levels. It just shows us that our world as government colleagues has redefined. We're actually managing the new normal that we will have never managed before, where information is coming from different directions. I mean, the experiences that we've got these days, actually, we traditionally would have talked about our experience in the office. But today, if ever I can ask colleagues who are in the call today, they will tell you about the experiences having to take a call and be in a conference meeting while they're in their own car or while they're driving somewhere. They will tell you about how they've actually had been called to come in to address the meeting while they're at home, because that's what has been the reality for the past 2 months in terms of what we've been doing. Another interesting reality is I've been actually privileged to look at some of how other pastors, actually, their normal church now is actually something that they are doing over the internet, and they have to do it from home, and social media being a driver for it. So definitely it's a very interesting opportunity all of a sudden, not just to innovate today as government, but to come up with a self-sustainable cycle of how this innovation is going to carry us through the normally way we're used to. So these are the very interesting phenomena we've seen before COVID-19 as a reality when you talk about smart government in whoever we were. We're talking about open data, we're talking about citizen services, we're talking about buildings, we're talking about smart safety, we're talking about all interesting topical things that were happening around the world. It was just normal to talk about them. And some of the reality that we faced during COVID, some of this particular part became a very good discussions, but we have never actually been practical about them, implementing them from home. One, just to take you another part, we spoke about interesting capacity and capabilities that we have been building. I mean, companies like ourselves, we would speak about cloud in South Africa, and I mean, other companies, big companies have joined us in doing it. We spoke about real-time alerts. We spoke about all these interesting metrics that we know for a fact that were leading us to what we're calling a smart government, or a smart city, or a smart transport, depending on what kind of dialect we're doing and talking about every time. I mean, it was very funny. We're talking about omni-channels as something that we are planning to do and something that's just going to come in our part. But the reality is, I don't think that is smart government. I don't think that is exactly where we should be pitching or should be starting. Let me maybe talk of a phenomenon of what I've learned through the years of working with Microsoft and HP, how then I'm seeing this coming back home and how it becomes a reality. I'm just going to talk about these 4 pillars today, and that's the only conversation I want us to have with the time that is given. I want us just to understand what is a smart government and what drives the government if it has to be smart enough. So I want us just to reflect on this particular reality, because sometimes when you do things, we are moved by the trends of the world and forget that we live in KwaZulu-Natal. That's why my landing screen on my first screen was depicting the village, because that's where I grew up, that's what I'm used to, and I cannot then change the reality of moving to a big city and make it as a normal way of making decisions. I will then just introduce these 4 pillars that I would like us to engage on today as a way of the foundations on how a smart government could be able to be depicted or be built. I don't know how many of you understand when you're talking about engaging citizens, what it means. And I know for a fact that in the province where I belong, which is in KwaZulu-Natal, we've got a very clear understanding of this, because in majority of the time, we more or less work as this government to go into Indaba, go to Imbizos, hearing what people are saying and how people are feeling. So when you come to the engaging the citizen, I want us to look back and think about Mamum Kize. I will make it that particular down to that part. What does Mamum Kize today, if you ask her about KwaZulu-Natal province, what will be the feeling about KwaZulu-Natal province? What is the government doing for them? So that is the most important part of when you're talking about the citizen engagement and talking about how we engage our citizen. Can we be able to reflect on the experiences of a citizen and be able to come up with the understanding of the fact that we're working with human beings, we're working with our parents, we're talking about people who are actually the custodian of how a citizen or government operates. So that is one of the things that I want us just to bring home and have a very good understanding around. When you're talking about smart government, it's not smart government because I'm able to pay people in time. It's actually a smart government because I know I'm paying a person who's got a name, who's a persona. So when we then structure our smart government going out of COVID, let's just not lose the touch of the fact that we are rebuilding for a society that's got names, that's got surnames, that's got people. So our smart government idea, let's start it in a very good presenter, being a fact of the smart government start with the people, start with the citizen, start with the voters, start with people who are actually human beings like us. And by the way, we are playing a dual role. While we work for government as colleagues, we're still citizens, and we're expecting the very same to service us, so we can make it that particular personal whenever we start planning. So the first part and the first pillar that is important around your smart government, it is understanding of your citizen and understanding the personas that formulate a citizen within government. I want us to move to the next one. Because we understand our citizen, we speak to them every time. And now we are even talking to them on social media. We talk to them where they are. How then do we empower our colleagues? How do we empower our government officials and empower our leaders and our employees to start working with the intelligent and smart government platforms that we learn? That's when technology plugs in. Most of the time, I always say to people, smart government is not technology. So it doesn't mean that because I'm a good CIO, then my department is smart enough. I think smart government is a collaboration of your communication, your government teams, all the people working together to recognize government work and responsibility back to society. So in the second one, we then now start looking at, for example, today, if the Minister of Education or MEC of Education is going around ensuring the schools are ready for opening next week, how are we making sure that whatever is going as a feed into social media, whatever is going to as a feed into the news, it's actually reflected back into the department's plan, and it's actually being able to project on the readiness that the MEC is speaking about every time. How do we collect all this data and artifacts, and how do we make sure we project it correctly? That's where the platforms that are empowering the employee that work with Department of Education are important. Somebody can phone today and say, how ready are we? If the official of government does not have it handy around the number of schools, the number of PPEs that have been distributed, and the number of sanitations being done in schools, if we don't have that information handy, what will mean I'm then not empowered to respond to that particular call at that particular given time. And then from there on, that talks then next into our optimization being a third pillar. How do we optimize the government operation? I think this is where our province currently is really working hard on, because of the state of the province address. The Premier made it very clear that the government of KwaZulu-Natal is an integrated government. It's working together in servicing the citizens. So the question comes then, how do we then optimize and really utilize the capabilities we have built on big data, utilize the capabilities we have built on the platforms, utilize the capabilities we have built when we went out to society to ask them and to connect with them around what we need to do. So optimization of operation, it talks to, can I be today be able to be seen as Sandile, a citizen of KwaZulu-Natal in one? That is the most important part, which then leads me to the last particular pillar, which I wanted just to maybe articulate on. My last pillar is actually about innovative government, a transformational government. Remember, once you actually have the citizens aligned and you are able to talk to citizens with ease and engage them, once you've got an employee of government and a colleague of government who's empowered to respond into the demand and the ask from the citizen, once you've got an operational machine that is able to pay invoices in 30 days, that is able to send information out to people, you then allow society to engage to government, to innovate with government, and you've got people who are actually proud enough as government employees to start innovating. For example, somebody who's Mr. Mhlongo, who actually have been working with payments all the time, all of a sudden is empowered to pay within 30 days and be confident to answer how many invoices is paying in time, and how exactly that could change and transform the economy that you are busy rebuilding. So I think for me, with the smart government concepts that we're actually talking about today, it's actually our way of recovery as we're going through what we have been seeing with COVID and beyond. I want us to go through some of the next slides. I won't just be as detailed as this one, but I will just then start playing scenarios and snitches around them. So my next slide, that's gonna just be looking at now, what are the things that are depicting some of the conversation we had? I mean, you can see here, you can read for yourself, some of the intelligence systems that you are putting in place currently are in silos. How do you optimize them and how to work them together? For example, how do we start supporting people for some of the most important things that they're looking for and that are important for the citizen? How do we ensure that when you're empowering our government officials, our leaders are able to go out in confidence and be able to represent the information, the smart government that is represented by the people on the ground who understand where it is. It's always with a pride every time when you see the premier starting to talk to us on Sundays, how much of information is around him, how he's confident and understanding and knowledgeable about what's happening on the ground when it comes to COVID. It's always interesting to see the MEC of Health when she talks about the numbers and the different parts. Isn't that depicting already how smart we are becoming as government dealing with the epidemic? We have seen this happening in 2010, and I hope it's not because we're dealing with the epidemic that we are becoming smarter and our processes are working very well, but it's actually a start and a foundation of how we're engaging with the citizen, how we're empowering our officials, how we're optimizing our operation, and how we're transforming as government. This one is actually just talking to traditionally how we build our base and how now the new base has changed. Data is becoming important. NHI, for it to work, it needs data. And how do we really work with this particular part? Some of this, SharePoint services is a new part of phenomenon. This province, I think, is becoming a very interesting smart government integrated with share services and share part of what needs to be done. I just want to go to the last 2 slides so that I can prepare for the questions and prepare for some of the engagement. So this is more or less depiction of what then smart government looks like. Yeah, Boma.
It seems like they're not seeing the slides. Can you try again?
Okay, I'll try again. Okay, are we then seeing the slide now? It's going to play very slowly.
See them.
Now, yes, now it's talking to the smart government solutions. These are some of the not Microsoft solutions, but these are some of the solutions that we see in government. And some of them, I'm sure colleagues on this particular lecture will identify with. Some of them, they're talking about how are we becoming smarter with the way we communicate, how we're becoming smarter with the way we're managing our grants. Some of the interesting parts, we've been working around making sure water availability in schools, water availability in communities. Some of the smart solutions I've seen or smart things that have been done by the province was on the district level. How can you be able to share this information faster? I know that currently some of them have been done within the WhatsApp groups. They've been done in some of the emails. How much smarter can you become around creating dashboards that can talk into a mayor, talking into a councillor in a ward, and be able to talk into all the way into the premier with ease? Some of the things that we're looking forward to are some of those kind of things. Some of the very interesting part you will see very soon with education coming back is the fact that we might need to come up with a clever ways on how kids can continue doing their homeworks and how kids can continue doing their work while they're at home. Because some of the kids, while they're going to be going to school, we want to disadvantage some of the kids by not doing. But the question is going to come every time, and I like this question. How accessible is the internet into some of the areas in the rural areas? And that's a question you need to answer as the colleagues in government. There's a question you need to answer as the leaders, and people who are in this particular call. As I finish, some of the architectural, it starts with connectivity being a very important infrastructure. Connectivity is like a road. If you don't have a road and if it's not tied very well, it actually creates a lot of accidents and coincidences that you don't want to see. So some of the things that I've seen in this province, which I like about working with the province and government these days, is there's a very clear understanding that there's connectivity requirement and the expectation of this, not only just into the area of what is normal, but to the areas of rural areas and some of the things. And I've seen a very interesting plans. Some of this particular part around sensors, connectivity of devices, and some of the integrated operations and command centers and control. Some of this is currently being depicted physically by the structures we put in government, but I know for a fact that this is soon changing to look forward in a different way. This is a very interesting picture that I wanted to part with, which I've seen in my government, KwaZulu-Natal government, that is guiding all of us as the service providers to this particular government. As they're depicting the smart province, they're already very clear about connectivity. They're very clear about digital skills because we need to come up with new skills and balance the requirement. And they're very clear about automating some and optimizing some of the systems that they were using traditionally and to come up with a new way of doing it. And again, information, because now we're relying on data, there's a very good intent by my government in KwaZulu-Natal to see how we secure it and how do we manage it. For me, this is a very good start on how the smart government can work. And I think for me, this lecture is just a show in a very high level and very snippet of saying what's formulated smart government, what are the really mega trends happening around the world, but how do we localize them to the province, and how does the province going to move forward working with some of yourself to actually be able to be smart enough. This was my last part, and I wanted just to say thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope there will be some engagement, some questions, and I know for the fact that MKI will be following up with some of the other sessions. They can deep dive in some of this particular part. Of course, I work for Microsoft. This is where I end. And thank you very much, Thandeka, for the opportunity. I will wait for the questions.
All right. I have a question from Bongomusa Zondo, who is asking, what will be the key negotiables that must be in place in order to move ahead with smart governance or smart government? I think he means smart government. But I think you've addressed that question in your last slide by saying the government of KwaZulu-Natal has taken a stand to move with the smart government, and the pillars towards the smart government is connectivity, it's digital skilling, where we have to upgrade the skills of our people. We need to automate our systems and integrate our systems, and we need to make sure that we secure our information. I think that question indirectly has been answered. Then I have a question from Anonymous, who is saying, please address MS platform on digital twinning for infrastructure assets and the MS drone simulation platform. So, and in particular, a South African office has applied it, and if South African office has applied it, and if so, where? I think maybe that's a question that we can try and deal with.
Okay, so no, I'm not an expert in some of the technology being asked, but I've been exposed to some of this particular technology working with a team in South Africa. One of the key, part of this, what we have done very well, within Microsoft is ensuring that the part of moving the actual capability or the intelligent cloud closer to the actual devices is done correctly, meaning we're no longer just relying on sending information straight into the cloud, into the big cloud, but you are able to replicate and be able to move some of capabilities closer to the, what we call it will have been a device or been a sensor. And again, making sure that we are able to contain that particular capability of building that that particular or empowering that particular device to be localized and be able to sync back into the part. That's what I think some of people are hearing twinning part as a capability that is there. So there's part of that that is being introduced in South Africa. You will see it a lot in the agricultural sector. There's a couple of things that they're currently trying to do within the agricultural sector itself in depicting and creating this particular part. In the big infrastructure, we're actually looking into government, into some of the opportunities that you can be able to drive some of these technologies around the fact that we know in some of the places connectivity might not be high, but you can empower the actual, let's say, for example, a sensor, we can empower some of the capabilities that they want to drive within your way bridge, so many other things that are actually being used by government today. How do you put that capability closer so that it can be able to have power enough to work and empower itself to capabilitate that particular device to offer as best as possible? We can engage more. There's some people who specialize on this in Microsoft. It would be nice actually to find out with Anonymous what kind of level of deep diving he's looking for so we can be able to address it correctly.
All right. I think Bongomusa was very specific, and he's posted again. He's saying he actually wanted to deal with governance, highlighting the difference between governance and government, which we are all aware of. If you're still able to cover that, it's fine. You can. We still got a little bit of time, but we also have something on board coming from Nisar. Saying how do we ensure that the poorer communities or municipalities can afford the costs that are associated with smart government?
Okay, I will try to address both. I will try to do Bongomusa part. I think the key negotiations that we need to do, Bongomusa, in coming up with smart government, by its nature, remember governance, the way we have actually adopted our governance frameworks, they actually been framed around some of the traditional way on how government operated. So some of the key negotiations that we will need to do, firstly, is to understand that how then do we rebuild our policies and the frameworks that we formulated as government to actually favor the fact that when Auditor General comes, he might have to rely on a digital policy and a digital trace of transactions that have happened. So I think for me, the first part is how do we become clever the way we put the policies in a governance level, and how do we really reframe our way of operational and frameworks within government. And then within the government itself, we know today it's actually a normality that the government must have an IT director, an IT infrastructure manager. But really, when you look in the future, some of these roles are being digitized and being changed. How then do we as government reframe it and be able to say within finance, within marketing and communication, you have a digital officer who look after the digital platform and digitalization of government. So those are the new things that I can think we need to renegotiate, look at exactly how our frameworks of delivery are going to be able to do this particular part. This then brings me to how then do we restructure KwaNongoma? How do you go to Mkuze and then come up with a new way of governing and being able to do a smart government? That is actually what is actually, I think, is obsessing the KwaZulu-Natal government today, as far as I'm being engaging with them. The first part of the engagement has been around is how do we get connectivity being pushed far enough to go to eManguzi, for example, so that the hospital in Mangus does not only just know how to send transition, but is able to actually do a telehealth and be able to consult with a doctor who's sitting at King Edward because they specialize on that, or Albert Luthuli as a specialty referral hospital. So I think for me, the connectivity priority given by government of KwaZulu-Natal, and not actually just being looking at affordability of a government or of a municipality. But I mean, SA Connect, there's a very clear indication around utilizing that bandwidth and your capability in the background to get there. The other last part, and I would like us to maybe to challenge ourselves on, as a private sector, I mean, being Microsoft that I work for, is to look at how do we partner with government? Because in some areas, you will find that there is private company that's got the capability to push some of the data all the way to Mangus for the purpose of their business. How do we create very good agreements and working agreements with government so that we're able to utilize infrastructure to help citizens, not because we are government and private sector, but just because we are all citizens of the province and of the country, and partner to push information and push data, utilizing our capabilities where it's open to be able to cover that part. So for me, some of the poor government, I mean, poor municipalities, we might need to restructure how we're planning together. We might have to restructure how we partner as a private sector, move away from the mentality of Umhlanga, because my office is at Umhlanga, I will partner with my government toward making sure Umhlanga can develop. But to look at beyond Umhlanga, beyond, I mean, Durban CBD, to start looking at Imangus, look at Ngwelezane, and come up with a way of how do we structure industrially and government partnership to actually make sure that we can service those parts. Connectivity is key. I mean, it's the only way and the only definer for a smart government and making sure that people are serviced correctly.
We have a question on will government assist, or will smart government assist small companies? Even though I don't think that Microsoft per se can answer that, because you're not from government per se. But in your view, how do you think that government, in a smartness of it, must be assisting the smaller businesses?
In my contribution to that, I mean, correctly, Tandek, I'm not government, so I can actually only be answering it from the partnership that we do with government. The sooner we are able to consolidate as government and present our approach and present our systems in unison, I think that will empower a younger person like Tulani, who might be Mlazi, who might want to write an app on how to report potholes, for example. I mean, the most important thing is ensuring that our governance framework and governance structures are actually so friendly to innovation. So I think for me, that's been discussed before, the fact that we need to ensure that our policies, our ability to say, if Temba comes to me and Temba has designed a drone that can be able to fumigate, I mean, a field of unwanted plants and alien plants around, I mean, Bergville, for example, how does Temba able to get into government system and be able to offer this service and that solution as a probability of solution that can make our government to be able to respond into the epidemic or to respond into the, I mean, unwanted or a foreign plantation that might be growing in the place, which is actually threatening our food security. So that's the most important part that I think we're coming into government for. And second, there's the private sector. I mean, we're always working with government in actually capacitating the young people and even the small businesses on being able to use technology professionally and be able to answer to government faster and partnering with other people in other countries too.
Okay, we ran out of time, but perhaps you can take the last questions may be answered. You may answer them offline. There is a concern that, you know, there's not awareness in rural area as to what smart governance is, and smart government is, both government and governments, and what can be done to ensure that people in rural areas are capacitated and they are aware of this and they know exactly what to do. I mean, I know that a few weeks ago, you talked about smart village and so on. What is it that can be done, you know, to ensure that people are aware of this?
One key thing, Thandeka, and I always like when we talk in these platforms, we always talk from, and I'm sorry it mustn't sound offensive to some of the people or offended about it, from the level of privilege. I mean, because now I live in this particular area called the Tegwini, now I see a rural area person different from what I am. Majority of us, we've got our roots bedded down to Zululand or bedded down to Eastern Cape, which is currently rural. So the most important thing, let's just take a very first layer. The first layer, for the ability for my grandmother to understand what governance and smart government is a responsibility I carry as a person who's aware on how, when I visit, I'm able to articulate and help them to understand what our government and how we're transforming in government. That's the first layer. The smart village concept, we always think of smart city as a way of doing things, and we associate smart government with smart cities. My always thing that I'm now currently working with passionately, I mean, privately and within Microsoft, is how do we really utilize a smart village concept? What is a smart village? Currently in a village, there is a water somewhere, there is inkosi ekhona lapho ubaba ungaba umkhize, ubaba uDlamini uyinkosi yendawo. Kune-councillor which has been elected duly by our part of government. Then there's a school and there's a police station. How can we not connect such ecosystem already and be able to start talking to the fact that there's an agricultural part line? It might be small scale farming that can benefit from that. Usandile from Mahlabatin can go back there and be able to start actually introducing sensor-based way of doing a proficient farming, because it can make sense. They've got the land, they've got the water, but they need to understand how to water and what kind of seed can be done there. So I think for me, let's not look at only government as a responsible party that can actually be able to create a smart and understanding of smart government in our rural areas. Let's understand, when I'm there, how do I start coding sessions during Christmas when I'm back there? How do I start? Very simple thing, making people understand, by the way, have you heard about smart government, smart village? So those kind of conversations that we are doing in the urban areas, we need to take them back to rural areas, honestly, like people who are born there and people who are citizens in that area.
All right, I think we'll wrap up for today, and we leave the session there because we have 30 minutes to run the lecture and we are already over by 4 minutes. But in conclusion, thank you very much, Mr. Mahlaba. We really appreciate you giving us this lecture. Moses Kotane runs lectures every Friday for 30 minutes from 12 o'clock to 12:30. And you are welcome to continue with your questions, which will be answered by Mr. Mahlaba online. I must advise the public that the province of KwaZulu-Natal has been very progressive. They've approved the digital transformation strategy, which has 4 pillars. And the first pillar is that we must connect the province. The second pillar is that we must upskill our citizens, our government, our business with the digital skills in order to meet up with the challenges of the global community. We must make sure that we automate and integrate our systems. By the way, automation creates more jobs rather than shedding jobs. There's a misperception there. I must stress that. And the fourth pillar is that government and its citizens must protect its information. So thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much to the attendees. My name is Thandeka Ellenson. The slides will be available on the Moses Kotane website, which is www.moseskotaneinstitute.com, and you shall go to lectures. You will be able to find the slides there, or www.moseskotane.com. Thank you. Bye.